Welcome to The Verdict. Kent Myers here without Mick Cornett for this week, but Mick will be back in a couple of weeks. Today we're going to bring you a show that is a little more in-depth look at an organization that we've visited about before and happens to be a sponsor on our show. The organization is called Oklahoma Lawyers for Children. It's an organization that was formed to provide pro bono legal service to abused and deprived children in Oklahoma County and in the surrounding area. And today we're going to have on two guests to talk to you about Lawyers for Children, what they do, how many children are being affected by the services that this organization renders, what they charge, which is nothing, for their service, and just how committed the volunteers are and how much time the volunteers spend dealing with abused and deprived children. It's a subject that is dear, I know, to all of our hearts, and we care most about our youngest citizens who are needing the protection of the law without having done anything wrong in the first place to be subject to the legal system. So today we're going to be visiting with John Hermes, the chairman of the board of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, and Tsinen Bruno-Thompson, the president and CEO of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children. They've got a lot to tell you about an interesting organization. So stick with us. We'll be right back. You're watching The Verdict.
I've always been a public servant. I've served either tribes, I've served the federal government, or I've served state governments. The law allows me to express my natural desire to advocate. My name is Stephanie Cochran. I am an attorney and I am Chickasaw. Lawyers give their clients, and in my case, tribal governments, a voice. And it's through legal decisions that tribes have been able to accomplish and to regain some much lost footing that they encountered in the late 1800s and the 1900s. When I reflect back on this time in history, I think I'll look at it in terms of opportunity. And I think now we have to turn those opportunities into long-term success for our future generations.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofnation.com.
People have been talking about energy independence for a long time. It's always been popular, but today it's possible.
We have an enormous supply of oil and gas in the United States, much more than we thought just a few years ago.
New technology, massive new discoveries, largely made by Oklahoma companies. It literally changes everything.
And Oklahoma is leading the charge. Go watch this video to see why. Energy independence starts with us.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Kent Myers here, flying solo today without Mick Cornett, but he will be back in a couple of weeks. As I indicated in the opening segment, we want to talk today about an organization that's doing wonderful work here in Oklahoma County and the surrounding area, wonderful volunteer work for the smallest and most innocent of our citizens, abused and deprived children. It's Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, an organization that was formed here in Oklahoma City a number of years ago, is functioning at a high level of performance and service to the community. And we brought two people here today to tell you about the organization, what it does, how it does it, and if possible, what you might do to assist the organization. On my right is John Hermes. John is a longtime friend of mine. He's a lawyer with McAfee and Taft, the largest law firm in the state of Oklahoma. John is chairman of the board of directors of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children. With McAfee and Taft, he has not only been the managing partner or president of McAfee and Taft, but he's also now the general counsel for his law firm, as well as carrying on an active trial practice. He's a fellow in the American College of Trial Lawyers. He has won a number of awards for pro bono service and service to the profession, and we're really pleased that he could make this visit to The Verdict, his first visit. John, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Kent.
On my left is a repeat visitor to The Verdict, Tsinen Bruno-Thompson. Tsinen is President and Chief Executive Officer of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children. She did her undergraduate work and her law work at Oklahoma City University, and having said that, that tells me that I left out John's educational background, and I apologize for that. Did his undergraduate work at Ripon College and his law work at the University of Oklahoma, where he graduated with honors. Shanina, as I say, did her undergraduate and law work at Oklahoma City University, where she distinguished herself as a good student. She was engaged in private practice for a number of years, and in 2010 the organization was lucky enough to find her and employ her as the president and CEO of Lawyers for Children, and that's what she's been doing since 2010. And I might say, having some knowledge of what goes on there, the strides taken since John's ascendancy to the chairmanship of the board and Shanina's presidency has just been spectacular. It's taken it to a level most folks didn't envision was even possible. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me back.
Well, tell our viewers who may have just seen the commercial once in a while, what is Oklahoma Lawyers for Children?
Well, Oklahoma Lawyers for Children is the only nonprofit that is authorized to represent abused, neglected, and deprived children in Oklahoma County that go through the Juvenile Justice Center in Oklahoma.
Authorized by whom?
It comes about by an administrative order that was entered by the district court judges of Oklahoma County.
So the court has authorized?
Yes.
Okay.
Because you can't hire a private lawyer to represent these children. That representation only comes through the Juvenile Public Defender's Office and Oklahoma Lawyers for Children.
Now, what do our volunteers at Oklahoma Lawyers for Children charge to represent abused and deprived children?
They charge nothing. It is a labor of love for all of these volunteers.
Well, what if this lawyer that is appointed to represent a child has to expend out-of-pocket money for expenses, witness fees, deposition transcripts, exhibits, and the like? Where do those funds come from?
Well, typically those funds come from the volunteer lawyer. The organization will help with that sometimes, but the group that represents these children and comes to volunteer for Oklahoma Lawyers for Children are very generous and care about this, and so typically they do that from their own pockets.
John, what are your thoughts about what we've been talking about here?
I think it's a unique organization. I think it's a great organization. It started with two people who formed it back in, I think, 1997 or 1998. It's grown so that now there are 1,127 lawyer volunteers and 477 non-lawyer volunteers. So we have a total of about 1,600 volunteers. Grew from 2 people up to 1,600 people. It's particularly unique, I think, in that the lawyers don't charge. We track roughly to see how many hours are spent. The market value of the time spent by the lawyers is something over $4 million.
Per annum?
Per annum.
Yes.
Per year.
Wow. Well, that's a hefty contribution. Tell John, you are a volunteer, not only are you chairman of the board, but you get your hands dirty right down in the trenches with everybody else. You've tried these cases. Tell us about the commitment that is involved in trying a case representing an abused and deprived child.
It is the same commitment that we bring to representing people who pay us. We do the same sort of work. We think it's high quality work, and we spend all the time it takes to try the case. I think I've had 2 cases, one that I can remember, well, 2 cases that went to trial. One of them was about a 7-day trial.
Jury trial.
Jury trial. And in the other one, the jury was waived, and it was about a 4-day jury trial. It's all of our people, without exception, have a tremendous commitment to do what's right for the children.
Now, the representation, Shanina, of these abused and deprived children may begin early on in the case, just after the child is taken into custody. How long will it last?
You know, an average time in Oklahoma County for a child's deprived case to run is about 18 to 22 months, but it can go longer than that because once the deprived aspect is finished, our volunteer lawyers stay on until permanency is achieved for the children.
What do we mean by permanency?
Permanency can mean that the child is either reunified with parents, and the child can be placed in a permanent guardianship, and we prepare all those guardianships in our office, or the child can be adopted or possibly age out.
So a lawyer that gets a call from you saying, I want you to take a case, knows, or they find out pretty quickly, that they've signed on for an indeterminate term, as long as it takes.
As long as it takes, and they stay with that child until their permanency is achieved.
Now, what if there's a particular case, John, where we'll say there are 3 siblings, and 2 of the siblings are old enough to have good, firm, well-formed opinions and say, we do not want to go home again to that home. That's a terrible place to be. And the third has a contrary view. I do want to go home. What does Lawyers for Children do there about volunteers?
Generally speaking, it'll get 2 lawyers to represent the children, one to represent the 2 that agree, and the other to represent the one who has a contrary view about whether he wants to go home or not.
So our volunteers could be taking, they're volunteers from the same organization, but they could be taking contrary positions depending upon the wishes of their client and the other factors.
That's not uncommon at all. It's not uncommon for us to have 2, sometimes 4 and 5 attorneys that represent children because the sibling groups can be so large.
I want to get into a few more numbers after the break, and we've just got a couple of minutes here before we have to take a break. But tell our viewers how many children we served, or the Oklahoma Lawyers for Children served this past year in 2013.
That's a pretty big number. Between our representation of every child at every single show cause hearing that happens 5 days a week.
Every child that comes into the system will have a show cause hearing.
Every child.
And every child that comes in and has a show cause hearing is represented at that show cause hearing by one of your volunteers.
You might explain what a show cause hearing is.
Sure. The show cause hearing is the hearing that takes place almost immediately after a child is picked up and placed into protective custody. And those hearings take place 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year, and it is to determine whether or not the pickup of the child was lawful and also to whether or not that child stays in protective custody.
And how many children was that this last year?
It was over 1,700 that were just in show cause. So between show cause representation and our other representation of children in in-depth cases, the longer ones, the deprived cases that go on from that, we had over 2,800 cases in children that we represented.
The cases or children?
That would be a combination of both, because the show cause is individual children.
Right.
The cases may have many children involved in one case.
Okay. We've got to get to a break, and then we'll be right back. You're visiting with John Hermes and Tsinen Bruno-Thompson, the representatives from Oklahoma Lawyers for Children. We're talking about services that lawyers render to abused and deprived children in Oklahoma County for free. You're watching The Verdict. We'll be right back.
When you have something important to communicate, it becomes clear that there's a lot of competition for your audience's attention. So how can your message stand out and actually resonate with your audience? Legal Graphics has the answers. The team at Legal Graphics will work with you to plan, design, and even test your presentation to ensure your message will be heard and remembered. Call Legal Graphics today to schedule an appointment. The readiness is all.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Kent Myers here with John Hermes and Tsinen Bruno-Thompson talking about Oklahoma Lawyers for Children. Shanina, I know that in recent years there's been as many as 8,000 kids in care in Oklahoma County, or 8,000 kids in care statewide. And that number has dramatically spiked upward. Where is it now, approximately?
Well, there's over 11,000 children in custody in the state.
Well, what accounts for such a huge increase in such a short time?
That's a really tough question, and I wish I knew those answers.
There's probably not a single cause.
There's not. A lot of factors come into play. There's a lot of drug issues, there's mental health issues, of course economic issues come into play. The biggest reason that we see children coming in is because of neglect, and neglect can become a very umbrella-like term, and people that are suffering emotionally or financially can neglect their children, and that will lead to them coming into custody.
And I guess the state's struggling with that large number now about what to do with it.
It's a really tough problem. It's a tough problem all the way around.
Well, how does it affect you?
There's a tremendous demand for our services.
Yeah. Well, I guess that to some extent accounts for how you've gone from a few volunteers to over 1,000.
We have a great number of people that want to help. When Oklahomans find out about a problem like this, we're wonderful about coming in to respond. The attorney community is no different than that. They come in, help these children. So is the non-lawyer community. Our non-lawyer programs have grown right along with our lawyer programs.
Well, let's talk about that just a minute. Let's talk about who the players are, if you will, using my phrase, in a child's case. Of course, there's the child. We have the parents. We have Department of Human Services, presumably, will be involved in the case. We have the state of Oklahoma filing a petition to terminate the parental rights, perhaps. And then we have others. And by others, I would include grandparents, perhaps, CASA representatives. By the way, tell us what a CASA representative is real quickly.
A CASA is a court-appointed special advocate, and typically those are non-lawyer volunteers who come in and they represent the best interests of children.
Okay. So we have all these different players in this one case.
And the judge.
And the judge, and the jury, maybe. What role do our lawyers play, or the Lawyers for Children lawyers play, in we represent the children? Do we also represent the parents?
We do not.
Do we represent DHS?
No.
Or the state of Oklahoma?
No.
Or the grandparents?
No.
Just the child?
Just the child.
And we keep that bright line clear so everybody knows that's where our responsibilities lie.
We do.
Now, when we started this work representing abused and deprived children, it isn't that these children weren't being represented before. They were being represented by the Public Defender's Office. And we know we have quite a capable Public Defender's Office here in Oklahoma County. Tell us about, John, what our relationship is with the Public Defender's Office.
The public defenders all have extremely heavy caseloads. As a Oklahoma Lawyers for Children lawyer, I may have one case. They may have 600 or 700 cases, and so they're really overworked. And what we try to do is to come in and, on the more difficult cases, help them. Sometimes they stay involved, sometimes they don't, but help them and do the type of things that they just don't have the time to do. They are all extremely capable, but they all have such limited time that it's a burden.
Well, you're chairman of the Board of Lawyers for Children. On your board sits, among others, the public defender.
Bob Ravitz.
Who has input into what this organization does to make sure it's consistent with his responsibilities. Another member of your board of directors is David Prater. Why is David Prater involved?
He's the district attorney.
And why is that important?
Well, he's in charge of all of the district attorneys that are, or assistant district attorneys that are out at Children's.
So if there's a petition filed to terminate the parental rights of the child, chances are that is a petition filed by the state of Oklahoma saying the state of Oklahoma thinks it's best to terminate these parental rights.
And they are acting under his watch.
Yeah. And CASA is a freestanding organization?
It is. It's its own 501c3 in Oklahoma County.
It's a volunteer organization as well. Well, John and Shanina, when we went through law school, I don't know whether the three of us together had equivalent of one course that would equip any of us to do any of this work. How do we make sure, it's an easy thing to volunteer for, how do we make sure that our volunteers are competent to represent these kids in a way that they should be?
The organization provides training, free training, CLE for them, continuing legal education, at no cost. And so that's a real attractive thing for lawyers because we're required to have a certain amount of continuing legal education. Janina probably knows more about the seminars that we put on, and I'd defer to her on that.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, we do at least 2 large CLE trainings a year.
For lawyers?
For lawyers.
And CASA workers?
For CASAs, for judges, for district attorneys, for public defenders. We have a variety of people that come and attend our trainings. We also have DHS workers that come too.
Well, talk about what our non-lawyer volunteers do. We've talked about what the lawyers do, and we've got 400 and some odd non-lawyer volunteers. What do they do?
Well, our largest volunteer program for non-lawyers is the shelter volunteers, and they go to the Pauline Meyer shelter and visit children each day that have been picked up and placed into protective custody. And
5 days a week?
Actually 6 days a week.
6 days a week?
6 days a week.
I actually thought the answer was going to be 7 days a week, but go ahead.
Well, the staffing at the shelter has changed a little bit, so we've tried to adjust it with that schedule. But these volunteers go in and meet with these kids who have suffered a terrible trauma by being removed from their homes. They provide a friendly, warm voice, a comfort to them, and also gather information that will be needed for the child in the course of their show cause hearing that will be following.
And what kind of training do our non-lawyer volunteers get?
Well, with the shelter volunteer program, we train them along with DHS that comes in and trains them in confidentiality issues. But we train them to do this particular work. And then, of course, our other non-lawyer programs are providing free home reassessments, safety reassessments for existing foster homes.
So if show cause, at the show cause hearing, if the judge has some question about whether the child should have been picked up or not, and even though they're picked up, what would be a good placement for the child, Lawyers for Children volunteers get involved, laymen get involved in that?
They come out and do the safety reassessments. We also have volunteers that are available to help with home studies. Okay. And that would be involved, a place where they would come in if the judge has questions about something like that. Then, of course, we have another volunteer program where we train. This is typically a law student or a graduate program volunteer, where the volunteer is trained and comes in at the initial appearance docket where the parents have actually, this is the first time they've received a deprived petition. And this volunteer comes in and does some research, gathers information that is essential to the child's case, and prepares that and presents it to the court and the attorney for the child before the first pretrial conference, which is the first substantive hearing in a child's deprived case.
Well, these are a lot of services. Is this organization, John, much like bar associations, you find one everywhere?
No.
Is this organization unique at all?
I think it was unique when formed. I believe Tulsa now has one up and running. In other states, I'm really not that familiar with the other states.
Actually, I found that we are very unique. In attending several national conferences that are dealing with these issues in juvenile court and court improvement types of programs, lots of states have something that's similar to Lawyers for Children, but most of those are funded substantially through their state or county governments. Oklahoma Lawyers for Children is not.
Well, let's talk about that. How much in federal funds do you get every year, John?
We rely upon either grants or contributions from our member attorney lawyers contribute, our non-lawyers contribute out of their own pockets in addition to providing the services. We get some funds from the Oklahoma Bar Association, thank you very much. Okay. And we get some grants from other entities. And
we raise it privately, I think.
We raise it privately.
But no state or federal funds?
No state or federal money.
Okay. You've been to meetings outside the state of Oklahoma. Have you found organizations similar to Lawyers for Children around in other states?
No. Nothing that provides the breadth of services that we do. I think that's another unique aspect of the organization. Because of those organizations that I have found in other states that have a hybrid of hired attorneys and then volunteer attorneys, no one has something that's truly volunteer like we do.
Okay. You both have your closing arguments ready. Each get 15 seconds. What's the last thing you want to tell our viewers about Lawyers for Children in 15 seconds?
It's a great organization. It provides help to those who need help, the children who can't protect themselves, and that's what we're there for.
We're a dynamic organization. We pull from the community in the legal aspect and from the non-lawyer aspect. Though we have grown a lot, we still need to grow. And there are lots of opportunities for both attorneys to volunteer a little bit or a lot of time. Same thing with our non-lawyer programs. We believe that if you have a place in your heart for the needs of a child, we have a place for you.
Thanks to both of you for coming. We're out of time. We've been visiting with John Hermes and Tsinen Bruno-Thompson on the Oklahoma Lawyers for Children subject, and I will be back in just a couple of minutes to give you a website address for Lawyers for Children. But you've been watching The Verdict. We'll be right back.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
I really think people are so unaware of the number of kids waiting just in Oklahoma. And I think if more people knew that those children were out there waiting, I think that just by the way we live our lives and the people we talk to, that maybe we can help encourage adoption from Oklahoma.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back. We had a great show today visiting with John Hermes and Tsinen Bruno-Thompson on Oklahoma Lawyers for Children. I want to give the website for Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and encourage you to check into it. It's www.olfc.org, and of course we have our website, theverdict.tv. Get on ours and tell us what kind of show you'd like to see, whom you'd like to see on as guests, because we do pay attention. Thanks very much. See you next week.